Hi, this is Bunton again with your Visual Functional Mathematics Entity level. In this section, we'll be dealing with Part 2, Measuring, which comprises of 7 individual lessons, including our last lesson, which will be questions and answer exercises, which you'll find very useful. Remember that the best way to go about learning with me is to download the videos from YouTube, and then you will have the videos to use at your convenience. Once you own the videos, you can stop and work at your pace so that you get the most out of it. Measuring, which is part 2 of the Entity Visual Functional Mathematics, starts with using money. In this topic, you will cover the relationship between pounds and pence, the use of pounds or pence, not both, in your calculations. You will work with money without calculator, and you will work with money with calculators. For example, you will add or subtract money with a calculator, and you will add or subtract money without calculators. You will multiply or divide money using a calculator, and you will round to the nearest pound and pence. Finally, you will be estimating money in quick calculations. Like I told you earlier on, it's always useful to understand the meaning of words when you're doing maths. That way, you know what you're doing. If you get a question on money, the units will probably be pounds or pence. You need to be able to switch between using pounds and using pence. Remember that 1 pound is equal to 100 pence or 100p. To go from pound to pence, you multiply by 100. To go from pence to pound, you divide by 100. Here's a question. What is 2 pounds 60p in pence? And here's another question. What is 70p in pounds? The solution is as follows. To convert 2 pounds 60p to pence, you simply multiply by 100, and that will give you 260p or 260 pence. To convert 70p to pounds, you simply divide by 100, and that will give you 0 pound and 70p. The correct money format is to write 2 numbers after the decimal points. When you're dealing with pounds, there is always 2 decimal places. You may get a question that uses pounds and pence. If you do, you'll need to change the units so that they're all in pounds or all in pence. Don't work with 2 different units. If you remember the fractions, when you're working in fractions, if you want to compare fractions, they all have to be have the same denominator, the bottom numbers. Then you'll be able to calculate them easily. It's the same principle. Here's an example. The solution is as follows. Change the price of the postage from pence to pounds. So 50p becomes 0 pounds and 50p. Both prices are now in the same units, which is pounds. So add together the cost of the DVD and the postage, which is £7.40 plus 50p, which is equal to £7.90p. So Kian has spent £7.90p. Here are some practice questions. 3 practice questions. Questions 1 and 2 are divided into A and B, and then question 3 is like a problem question which you'll find on the exam. Right. Point of warning, read your questions carefully and understand what it says. In questions 1A it is, what is £3.84 in pence? What is £1.27 in pence? What is 60, and then 2A, what is 61p in pounds? Remember, all you have to do is to put how many pounds. If it's £0, you put £0 and 60.61p. Question 3, which is more expensive? A pen that costs 65p or one that costs £0 and 69p? It's a T question. You need to work without using a calculator, usually when you're adding. You might need to be able to solve money problems without using a calculator. Example 1. Keiko is looking at 2 TVs in a shop. One costs £259 and the other costs £294. What is the price difference between the 2 TVs? You always need to know how much you will save. That's what they're saying here. The answer, you need to subtract the small price from the large one, as you did in your whole number calculation. 294 minus 259. Don't forget your borrowing and carrying rules. 4 minus 9 you cannot, so you borrow 1 from the 9 to make it 14, and then 14 minus 9 is 5, and then now that you've borrowed 1 from the 9, you now have 8. So 8 minus 5 is 3. 2 minus 2 is 0. So you write your answer properly. 294 minus 259 is equal to £35. So the price difference between the 2 TVs is £35. Here is another example. Kerry buys 2 cakes for £4. How much would it cost her to buy 5 cakes? Can you figure out this? What are the key questions here? Or what are the key points here? She bought 2 cakes and she wants to know how much 5 will cost. What do you do? The solution. You know that 2 cakes cost £4. So you need to divide 4 by 2 to know the price of 1 cake, which is £2. Now, once you know the price of 1 cake, you can find the price of 5 cakes. Again, write your answer out clearly and properly to get full marks. You have 3 practice questions here. Read them carefully and then attempt each of them. Remember what you've learned already. Okay? Converting pence to pounds, and then converting pounds to pence and writing them out clearly. And then when you've done your calculation, write your answer out clearly using the context within which the question was asked. For example, question 3. Lee is having a dinner party. She wants to spend £30 on food, £25 on drinks, and £10 on decorations. She has an overall budget of £60. Can she afford to buy what she wants? How would you solve that problem? Think about it for a minute. Of course, she'll have to find out the total cost of the item she wants to pay for and compare that with what she has. Oh, I've answered the question for you already. Well, almost. Adding and subtracting money using a calculator. You can add and subtract money using a calculator. Remember adding and subtracting using your calculator. If you remember that, then this should be a piece of cake. This time, just remember to type in the decimal points. That is important. Okay? Now, Sori wants to know how much she has spent on her shopping. That is example 1. Potato, 1.99, cheese, 2.99, beans, 59p, or no pounds and 59p. Solution. You need to use your calculator. At the bottom of this screen you see the keystrokes. Okay? And this will let you know why it's important to use the same format. You cannot use pence and then use pounds. If you're using pounds and pence, use pounds and pence. But if you're using pence only, you have to convert everything to pence. Okay? So, the answer is you add together everything Suri has spent. £1.99 plus £2.99 plus £0.59, which is equal to £5.57. Example 2 on adding and subtracting money using a calculator. Sabrina would like to buy a newspaper for 99p and a drink for 55p. She has £1.50p. Does she have enough money to buy both? First, you need to add up the prices of the items. 99p plus 55p equals 150p, and then 99p plus 55, which is in your calculator. So your answer is 99 plus 55 equals. Now you need to change that to pounds and pence, because that's the question. Although the problem is given to you in pence, but the question says she has £1.50p. Does she have enough money? So that's your calculator keystrokes, and then your answer. The cost of the two things costs £1.54p. Sabrina has £1.50p in her purse. So £1.50p less £1.54p is not possible at this stage. So no, she does not have enough money to buy both. Here are 7 practice questions. Read them carefully and see if you can figure them out for yourself. Interpret them. Remember the rules. Convert pounds to pence if you have both currencies, or pence to pounds if it's necessary. And then find out the total cost of items you need to get, and then if you have to pay for them, how much they will cost. Compare it with what you have. For example, question 6. So far he has bought kiwi for £1.55p and strawberries for £2.85p. Can he use his voucher? What was his voucher? You need to find out. Okay? Multiplying and dividing using a calculator. Note that it's when you're multiplying and dividing that you need to use a calculator. Anyway, if you're taking an exam, you will be told when to use calculators and when not to. You can multiply and divide money using a calculator in exactly the same way as whole numbers. Amy is saving up for a new radio. She can afford to save £12.75p a month for the next 10 months. How much will she save in total in the next 10 months? The answer, you simply multiply the amount per month by the number of months, which is £12.75p times 10. And that is equal to £127.50. You have 5 practice questions here. Again, the first 2 are basic calculations, and then the next 3, 4, and 5, you have to think a little bit carefully whether you should convert all to pence or pounds before, and then whether you should add anything before you do some subtraction. So think carefully, get your pen, get your paper, make notes. Question 5. I always explain question 5 because usually that is the most challenging. Fuel costs 124p per litre. Christie's car holds 50 litres of fuel. How much does it cost to fill Christie's car from empty? From empty is the key word. Give your answer in pounds. So you have to do two calculations first. You have to find the cost of filling her tank, and then you need to convert it to pounds and pence. Rounding up to the nearest pound. You might need to round amount of money to the nearest pound. And in this case, you look at the number of pence in the amount. The digits after the decimal point are important. If it's less than 50p, round down to the nearest pound below. So £3.16 rounds down to £3 only. If it's 50p or more, round up to the next pound. So £4.74 rounds up to £5. Ramesh is buying some material and it cost £2.32p per meter. How much is this to the nearest pound? Step 4. Look at the number of pence in the amount, which is £2.32p, and then, before you round up, what is the rule? 32p is less than 50p, so you have to round down. You have to round to the nearest pound. In this case, it will usually be the decimal points, the pence, which you'll have to manipulate to the nearest pound. Either you round up if it's 50p or more, or you round down if it is less than 50p. The example says, some sweets cost £3.50p per kilogram. How much do they cost to the nearest pounds? The p is 50p. So what do? Do you round up or you round down? Yes, you round up because it's 50p. So the £3 becomes £4. And that will be the cost, the estimated cost of the sweets per kilogram. And then you can also round to the nearest 10p. So you can round to the nearest pound, you can round to the nearest £10, and then you can round to the nearest 10p. Look at the last digit at the amount in pence if you're rounding to the nearest 10p. If the last digit is less than 5p, round down to the 10p below. So 14p, the 4 there is less than 5, so it becomes 10p. If the last digit is 5p or more, remember you're rounding to the nearest 10p. Round up to the nearest 10p, so 47p becomes what? Yes, 50p. You guys are clever. Example 1. Kyle has 32p and Leela has 56p. How much do they each have to the nearest 10p? Your solution. The last digit of 32 is 2. 2p is less than 5p, so you round down to 10p below. Kyle has 30p to the nearest 10p. Leela, on the other hand, the last digit of 56 is 6. So what happens? She rounds up to the nearest 10p, and then 56p will become, yes, 60p. And then don't forget, in a real life, sometimes you have to estimate money. You can use rounding to estimate answers to money questions. For example, Carl is buying some supplies on a company credit card. So far, he has spent £15.99p, £13.99p, and £127.99p. Estimate how much he has spent so far in his shopping. Now you got to be very careful with this. Quite often people make mistakes. They add the total sum before they round up. That is the wrong method. So, what is the right method? First, round all the numbers to the nearest pounds. So £15.99 rounds up to £16 because you're rounding up to the nearest pound. £13.99 rounds up to £14, and £127.99 rounds up to £128. Then add them together. 16 plus 14 plus 128 adds up to £158. So Carl has spent £158 so far. Remember, you have to follow this principle. If you use the wrong principle, you will not get full marks. And if you're in the office, you're doing some accounting or bookkeeping exercise for your boss, if you don't follow the correct principle, you will lose credibility. Here are some practice questions. You've got 6 practice questions. Read them carefully. You'll find out that as you progress, they get more and more challenging. Not challenging as in hard, but you have to just think very carefully. And remember some of the rules you've learned. If the amount you need to round is 50p and above, you round up. If it's less than 50p, you round down. If you have a number of items to round, then do them individually first before you do your calculation, as in question 6. Rahul is shopping. He buys food costing £1.99p, £2.99p, 99p, 99p, and £3.99p. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items. He pays with a £20 note. Estimate how much change he'll get. You're estimating. So what do? You add first all of them before you subtract. But if you're rounding up, then you have to round each of those items. So £1.99 becomes £2, £2.99 becomes £3, and so on before you do your calculations. Okay, as I told you before, at the end of the series of 6 or 7 lessons, I will give you a collection of questions and the answers. Now, what have we learned? We've learned that to calculate with money, we have to convert everything to one format, either to pence, if that is what's required, or to pounds and pence. When you're writing money, you have to give it 2 decimal places, because in money you cannot say £2.9 for £2.90. It has to be £2.90, and so on. When you want to convert, if it is pence to pounds, or if it's pounds to pence, you either multiply or divide depending on the rule. When you're rounding up, apply the same principles of rounding up. To round up, you round up 50 and above, or 5 and above, as the case might be. To round down, you round less than 50 or less than 5 down to the nearest pound or the nearest pence. Look at the questions. Give yourself time to understand them. And remember what I said at the beginning of the lesson. Download the files for each lesson, store it so that you'll be able to have access to it to do your work. Okay? The reason for that is not only having access, but you can work at your own pace. Some of these exercises require you to spend some time looking at them, especially the practice questions. So you need to pause your video and study it and think, because sometimes you have to write out the questions and do some calculations. So get the video, you own it, it's yours, and you can use it as many times as you want. I'll see you next time. Bye.